Now, we begin with a possible shift in a race that could decide control of the Senate. For the first time, Dr. Mehmet Oz is leading John Fetterman in the Pennsylvania Senate race just 4 days before the midterms. The new Hill-Emerson College poll giving the Republican a 2-point advantage in what has become a nail-biter of a race. But Oz will not have the support of the woman who helped launch him to TV stardom nearly 2 decades ago, and that would be your girl Oprah Winfrey, who announced her endorsement of Fetterman last night. And speaking of star power, both President Biden and former President Obama will hold a rally with Fetterman tomorrow in Philadelphia. Obama will also join Fetterman at a rally in Pittsburgh. Just last hour on The View, Fetterman had this to say about the continuing questions over his health and transparency and his refusal to release more medical records.
Feel that we have been leaving the same equivalent kind of medical information that Dr. Oz did. And, we've been running a campaign, and I think we have been very transparent, and all of our doctors believes, both from June and also in October, all agree that I'm fit to serve. And, to me, the race really isn't necessarily specifically about my health. I feel that we're running a very transparent rate about our health issues, excuse me.
Well, I think you look and sound great.
Oh, and that's all that matters. Jimmy is Sunny weighing in with her bout of approval.
Man, good to be here. Good to see everybody. I've been following this race very closely. As you know, I have a lot of family in Pennsylvania, big drinkers, and you would be too if you were a Pirates fan. But let's jump in on this. Fetterman's health is never going to be the issue, okay? It's his position on the issues, okay? Nobody watching, nobody at home has any issue with the fact that people go through debilitating conditions and in some instances are unable to complete a sentence. It's the fact that he doesn't want violent criminals to complete their sentences that have people leaning towards Dr. Oz. Where Oprah comes into this whole mess is she's just now part of the condescending class. She's part of the liberal elites. Yeah, she was friends with Dr. Oz her whole life, but now she's part of that class of people that says Republicans are evil, they're lesser than, they're too stupid to know what's good for them, so I'm with Fetterman, which is absurd, but that's who she's become.
That's right. And Kaylee, I wanted to drill down in this. The question is, does it matter who Oprah endorses? First of all, it's not unexpected, right? She went down a litany and endorsed every Democrat in every state, right? And including Stacey Abrams and throughout everyone. But the question is, I think what matters more and what's more representative of Pennsylvanians would be the editorial board of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, who came out and issued its endorsement and unlike Oprah, actually articulated reasons why. They talked to the lack of experience of Fetterman. They talked to the fact that Oz has committed to civility, has committed to trying to work with the other side. They really nailed down a whole list of why they specifically were endorsing Oz over Fetterman. And I venture that goes a whole lot further with Pennsylvanians than Oprah's endorsement.
Yeah, look, I don't think endorsements matter generally in a general election. Look, they matter in a primary when Jim Clyburn endorsed Biden in South Carolina.
Yes.
It mattered when Trump endorsed some candidates in primaries. I don't think they matter in a general, but what was interesting, to your exact point, Emily, especially the Oprah endorsement, this was courted for weeks by the Fetterman campaign. According to Politico, they said they knew the power of a Hillary endorsement. Well, we saw that power when she endorsed Hillary Clinton, to your point, and last time I checked, Hillary was never president. But what is particularly ironic is Fetterman touting a celebrity endorsement as he tried to deride Dr. Oz for being a celebrity, while on the same token, he's trying to tout this endorsement from John Legend, who wanted to defund the police. But none of that matters. His irony in endorsing a celebrity, touting it, and then going after Oz. What matters is his record. 10 first-degree murders released because of John Fetterman's vote. Heroin injection sites was something he endorsed in 2018. He applauded Oregon for decriminalizing all drugs, including heroin and fentanyl. And he got an endorsement from a group who wants to take sex off birth certificates, eliminate fracking, abortion without restrictions. That's what matters. Oprah can't save you, John Fetterman.
And can Fetterman save himself, Julie? So here's the question. Weirdly, when the president flew to Pittsburgh to campaign for him, his wife Giselle turned away reporters then. Oh, he wasn't answering any questions. But now, for some reason, he's going on this small media tour. He's going to join himself on The View. This is the same group of people who laughed about the possibility that Herschel Walker might have brain damage from his years playing professional football. They mocked DeSantis for, quote, looking like he had a stroke. But today, for some reason, Joy Behar was appalled that people have concerns about the challenges that Fetterman has been facing and said it's so unempathetic to the guy. And of course, we heard Sunny Hostin, oh, you look and sound great. It seems to me that there's not only a hypocrisy there, but on his part, an unwillingness to dig in to those reporters and the members of the press that would actually ask thoughtful questions and not just wait around in the dim light bulb.
Well, they're covering for their candidate, obviously, and it's not just Fetterman. I mean, a lot of people question, those who are fair and balanced, the mental capacity of our president, but you would never hear that conversation being held on The View or on any other mainstream media network. I also just want to bring up the whole debate between Fetterman and Oz. It really is very much largely leaning toward crime and the way that Fetterman treats crime. And in the state of Pennsylvania, the law says that prosecutors can bring a charge of felony murder. Yeah. It's also known in the state as second-degree murder, meaning that it doesn't have to be, somebody going out and intentionally killing somebody. If you rob somebody and they fall and they end up dying from, a fall, for example, you can be charged with second-degree murder, which would mean a mandatory life sentence. John Fetterman is against mandatory life sentences. So not only does this state not have the death penalty, but if you commit murder, whether it's first degree or second degree, you spend the rest of your life behind bars at the very least. John Fetterman wants them back out. He wants murderers not to be mandatory life sentenced. How do you even justify that? I can't understand.
Well, he's also against minimum sentencing in general, which has been codified at the federal level. There is a case behind every single rule or sentence that we have, including the felony murder rule. There is a reason, a heartbreak, a tragedy behind the reason why it was codified, so that those recidivists, so that we don't have a judge saying, I'm sorry, my hands are tied. I'm sorry, your loved one got tortured and raped to death, but instead they're out in 2 years. But that is what Fetterman is for. Cheryl especially underlined in the op-ed he wrote that's published on Fox News that talks about his approach to crime, but I found that it was really all about sort of attacking Oz in frankly a really overgeneralized and oversimplified way. He wasn't making an arguable case whatsoever for his policies. In fact, it seemed as if he was flip-flopping and talking about how safe he had made the town that he was a mayor of, which is in stark contrast to both statistics and what Pennsylvanians say.
Well, the flip-flop is an interesting term to use because the debate is what really turned the stage, if you will, for Fetterman. And when the polls really started to tighten, and now you've got this new Emerson College poll where you've got a 2% lead for Dr. Oz. In Pennsylvania, let's be clear here. Okay, that was the first part. The fracking, though, that is a big economic, jobs, kitchen table issue to voters in Pennsylvania. This all boils down to what they want. And what they want is someone that's going to support energy production in their state, jobs in their state. What's interesting about President Biden and former President Obama going to Pennsylvania tomorrow is that it's that climate agenda that has come from both of those leaders that has actually led to the job destruction we have seen in Pennsylvania and less energy production in general in this country. That's issue number one. You mentioned the Dr. Oz about the fact that he was endorsed by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. They talk about the fact he's got a business background. He's got a leadership background. He's got 20 years. It's not about Oz as a celebrity, they point out. It's about the fact that Oz is bringing, I can go to Washington and be a good leader for you, people of Pennsylvania.
That's right.
But that's why shame on Oprah, because she knows that about Dr. Oz. She touted him. She touted his business proficiency. And that's why it won't work to have her endorsement. What good is having the woman who gives everybody a free car if you can't afford gas for it? And that's why it's too little too late.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.